Hi, my name is Joe Jackson. I'm an interviewer, author, journalist and broadcaster. And what you're about to hear is one of the 1,400 interviews I did for publications such as the Irish Times, Sunday Independent, Hot Press Magazine and for RTE Radio 1. How do I know there are 1,400 interviews exactly? Well, I recently digitized all the damn tapes myself. But do remember that many of the interviews were done for the print media and recorded on cassette tapes, so some are, let's say, sonically challenged, but I happen to believe that sometimes sonic considerations should give way to historical significance. And I'm glad to say that at least some powers that be in RTE Radio 1 agreed with me on this, and broadcast between the years 2015 and 2018 many of my interviews in a series called The Joe Jackson Tapes Revisited. What follows is a programme that was made for that series, but never broadcast, due to circumstances beyond my control, which is what we broadcasters say when we don't want to start a war or get sued. But frankly, the pulling of this show really pissed me off. Because as I say in the intro, Mike Murphy was my mentor in RTE. I worked with the man for a decade. And I wanted to highlight in that setting and on that station the fact that there was far more and is far more to the man than the fact that he got Gay Byrne on TV to say, fuck off. I wanted it to be my tribute to the man. Okay, so what did Mike do, for example? Well, change the nature of arts coverage in not just Ireland, but in the Irish Times. So on this occasion, I say thank the Lord for the advent of podcasts, because now you can hear the show. By the way, if you want to read the article I wrote out of this interview in 2000, which we did to mark Mike's decision to end the art show on which we'd worked together, check out my website, joejacksoninterviewer.com. There you also can contact me access to the full tapes and those of a second interview we did in 2013. But enjoy the podcast. Okay, who doesn't remember the time on TV during Mike Murphy's Candid Camera show when Murphy, disguised as a Frenchman, pissed off Gay Byrne so much during a report he was recording that Gay said to his film crew, "Does he understand the expression, kick in the you-know-whats?" And then, directly to Murphy, "Do you understand the expression of..." It was hilarious. But if getting Gay to curse on TV is all Mike is to be remembered for, we would be doing the man a great disservice. Look at it this way. Back in the mid-1960s, Murphy was one of the first broadcasters on this radio station to break away from the Reithian model of broadcasting. What's that exactly, Joe? Well, it was a system devised with BBC by John Charles Walsham Reith, or rather, first Baron Reith. He saw broadcasting as a means of educating the masses, which in itself was a noble aspiration, but too often it came across as posh people talking down to us peasants. So, put another way, during a post-colonial era, Mike Murphy and co. helped democratise even the language we Irish can use on the radio. Bloody hell. Likewise, thanks to his tenure at the helm of the Art Show, which ran on RTE Radio 1 from 1988 until 2000, Mike helped subvert a similar snobbish tendency that dominated arts coverage in, say, the Irish Times, a newspaper for which I did weekly pop music interviews during the same period. But I myself hated so much the position of hierarchical prominence given to the high arts, such as classical music, that I'd taken in 1986 a college degree course in popular culture to try in my own tiny way to attack such elitist nonsense. But it wasn't until I interviewed Mike in 2000 I discovered that part of the reason he chose me to be the pop music correspondent for the Art Show from 1990 onwards was because, he says, I put pop in a cultural context. Mike also in 1996 asked me to take his place and host the Summer Art Show when he was on holiday, thus giving me my break as a presenter. So did all this make our interview soft-centred and sycophantic? You decide. I began playfully by taking my cue from an interview Mike did with Eamon Dunphy about Only a Game. I said I wished I could say of Murphy's book, Mike and Me, what he said about Dunphy's, but I couldn't in truth. Namely, attack his lack of application, niggardliness, and general demeanour.
I said it to him, did I?
That was your opening question to welcome him to the Art Show.
Oh, yes, I did.
And he lost it, because he thought you were...
Oh, yes, I remember that quite well, in fact. And I hadn't met Eamon Dunphy before,
okay.
but I had read his book, Only a Game.
Yeah.
And I remember having read it. I mean, firstly, I admired what he did in stepping outside the norm and being as honest as he was in it.
Okay.
I liked what he did. But I also thought that if I was one of the group, one of the team, I would kill the little bastard. But having said that, though, I didn't intend to be offensive when I said it to him. And what I was doing really was, knowing that he was a combative sort of individual, I figured, okay, well, I'd be well able to look after myself in a bit of in any kind of a little verbal scrap or a little altercation like that. And I figured, well, I know he'll be well able for this kind of thing too, so we'll have a bit of fun. But he answered it in a fairly peremptory manner and was, I gather, very taken aback by the question. And afterwards, yes, it is true, I heard from a number of people how he spoke very disparagingly about my cheek in opening an interview like that, with that who did I think I was. But he misunderstood what I actually had in mind about the whole thing. But I think it started a trail of misunderstanding between myself and Eamon Dunphy. I don't have any problems with him now.
Do you listen to
he probably has with me. I have no doubt he has. I mean, he called me once one of RTE's flower pot men. I never quite understood what it meant, but I take it wasn't complimentary.
No, it doesn't sound it, does it? No.
So, but I would have to say I admire what he does, and I enjoy him.
Mike Murphy, who was born in 1941, the eldest son of Kitty and Ned Murphy, and who before becoming a broadcaster worked as a draper, then with the Castor Oil Company and as an actor. In 1965, Mike became an announcer with Radio Éireann and moved into TV 6 years later when he was asked to host the National Song Contest. Later again, Mike hosted the Eurovision Song Contest and programmes such as Murphy's America, The Live Mike and Winning Streak. But back to the interview. In that last quote you heard Mike say about Eamon Dunphy, I'd have killed the little bastard, which is not the kind of line you'd have heard him say on Winning Streak. In 2000, I asked Mike if he felt hemmed in by his nice guy image.
I know you say you kind of rejected it in an Irish Times interview I was reading there. You kind of said, it's not necessarily true, people say I can be savage. Do you feel hemmed in?
I don't really, no. But I mean, I do know that if I do let fly at somebody verbally, it's not a pretty sight.
All right.
And I don't like to do it because I always get pangs of conscience afterwards, and I always feel that was unfair. For some reason or other, I was granted a very barbed tongue when and I know it as a child. I could offend my brothers and sisters very deeply and say the cruelest thing that you could imagine. And so I don't feel hemmed in by it, but I think, because I'm generally easygoing, and certainly in a work environment, I'm generally easygoing, and I don't lose my cool very often. Very seldom I lose my cool. And I'm kind of relaxed about my work in general. If I once lose my temper, then it's a shock to all and sundry around when they see what chaos I will create. So I can turn very, very nasty, and I've done it when I've in drink. I've done it particularly so I stopped drinking whiskey because after 3 I would just fire on whoever was nearest me and bite their knee. That's what I threatened to do with Pat Kenny if he asked me any personal questions on the Late Late Show.
You're not going to have a whiskey before you go on.
No, I'm not.
But you didn't. There are not. I mean, I must be said, there are not. I don't hear tales of people you exploded against in RTE. People speak from sound ops to the team that work with you. Speak most in the general and in the main very highly of you.
It would only have happened through my career maximum 5 times. In fact, maximum 5. But they would be pretty savage. I've done it with 1 or 2 producers now, even on the art show, but in private. But I've
not in front of the whole team.
Not in front of the team. I don't like that. I don't like to see that. I don't like to see people being humiliated,
stripped down. But how about with guests? I mean, some of the assets, like people are still talking about the day I mentioned even her name in front of you, like Nancy Griffith. You came in like a shot and you just said, I just can't stand that woman, I don't like her voice irritates me, why do people listen to this?
Absolutely.
I mean, and with other guests, were the people you were talking with where you felt, I have to go for this, I have to go for him, her, no?
Yeah, I felt with Nancy Griffith, I must say,
just hits the wrong note.
She came in with that glossy, wide-eyed, girlish approach to yet another interview.
Right.
And I interviewed her, and I didn't like her. She was smiling charmingly at me, but I knew there was solid glass in those eyes.
All right, okay.
And I knew that she wasn't even thinking. What she was doing with the guests I dislike are the guests who are broadcasting to the nation as distinct from having a conversation with me.
Okay.
So I can see it in their eyes very often. So, yes, I'm talking about me. Actors are the worst to interview. They're very difficult to interview because they are performing the role of interviewee. Right. I'm an actor. How am I sounding? And so I can't stand that.
But you must have bitten your tongue a lot of times.
I did, but there was a famous incident that they always said they wished they had kept. There was a guy who had contacted me and said, I'm doing art in golf, and could you do an interview with me? So he was using paintings, and he was trying to make people buy other than Waterford glass for golf prizes. So he was getting little sculptural pieces, little statues. They weren't. Okay. But he came into the studio, and we were recording it, and I was interviewing him, and all the time he was considered, and he was broadcasting to the nation. So they lost the tape because they said they were going to keep it as an example. I said to him, listen, Jack, or whatever his name was, will you for Christ's sake cut the crap? Stop fucking talking to the nation. Talk to me. Do you understand me? I am not going to sit here and listen to you making your Robert Emmett speech from the dock. Talk to me. It's a fucking conversation between you and me. Okay, let's try it again, will we? So we tried it again, and he was terrific.
Okay.
He was terrific.
Okay, he shifted.
But I just lost my patience with
and they should have kept that for broadcasting courses.
That's exactly what they said. They should have kept it for broadcasting courses.
Like those moments.
That's right, yeah.
Because someone's going to keep that and sneak it out there.
But they don't have it. They went looking for it because it travelled around the building.
All right.
At that point, remembering that this interview was for Hot Press and saying so to Mike, I asked about the role that music played, excuse the pun, in his teens. But I also had an ulterior motive for asking that question, and I love the fact that Mike twigged this in an instant. By the way, at one point he moves away from his desk in his office in Dublin's Harcourt Street, but basically what he's saying at that point is that as a boy he was a, quote, narky little bastard. Baron Reith must be turning in his grave.
Books and films are there from the beginning for you. They were kind of part of your cultural baggage as a child.
They were.
And even the records, I hadn't noticed this when I talked to you before, Mountain Greenery, which you've mentioned many times, followed by Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, Why Do Fools Fall in Love?
Why Do Fools Fall in Love? Glad you mentioned them. They're all exactly the ones. And I love them.
78?
78, and I used to take myself off into the dining room, which was always freezing.
Okay.
And I used to sing along to all of those.
With that kind of thing you just said there is that other kind of subtext to you. You say in the book that you will go into the room, lock the door, and sing along with all my heart and all my pent-up emotions.
That's right.
That was a way of discharging what you felt was the oppressive nature of the silence, your dad's silence and all that. Wasn't this a way
You're
of
getting into this area now, John.
I am indeed.
I know the technique.
You know the technique. You use it all the time.
I know the technique.
But weren't you? Wasn't that part of what music was to you, that form of expression, where you didn't express? You say in the book, too, you were silent a lot. You didn't tell your friends about kind of these conflicts with your daddy.
Never, ever did.
So
I mean, it was the same. It was not a good thing. I mean, you see, this was all before counselling, before talking, before Marion Finucane, before all the people that you could tell your story to.
Yeah.
And so there was never a question that I would ever. Yes, my father, God rest him, and my mother did not have a happy marriage. And my father was one of those silent, as my mother used to say, the street angel and the house devil, and he was one.
Right.
And he would come in and he was silent. I mean, you saw it in the book.
Sure.
And it was very distressing for me. I was the eldest, I was sensitive, I was kind of spirited. So I had the records that you see were a bit of a release for me because I'd want to get out of the room.
Yeah.
So I would leave the study.
But it was emotional release too, and this is something that has remained consistent throughout your life. You know, that pent-up thing you say you later had to address?
It was, yeah. I mean, I never became a good singer, as many people would agree, having seen me sing and attempt to do it on television. But I never became a good singer, but I loved it. I mean, I used to enjoy it. And I knew the songs really well.
Nice.
And I was quite popular, you know. I mean, I was quite popular with... I was just quite popular generally. Like, I kind of was like the leader of a gang. You know, we very big into sport, soccer and rugby. Big time. I was a good runner. I was a good rugby player. Then I got into the acting, loved the music, played a lot of tennis. Right. So like I was really active, but a lot of it was out of the house, and that was all.
Well, that's what it was. That was part of the agenda, wasn't it? To get out of the house.
I wanted to be doing things outside,
Yeah, to get away from it. Because now Stokes says his daddy was a panel beater who used to bring the stuff to Dad's garage, and he would have memories of the family then.
But you see, my father, I still meet people who tell me, I unfortunately never got to know him. I never, ever, ever, ever had a conversation with him.
Right.
You know, and then he turned out to be a real good grandfather. And he used to make phone calls to all and sundry. He wouldn't ring me now in later years, but he'd ring most of the rest of the family because there was too much between himself and myself. But he used to call to the house, and he used to dandle the kids on his knee. And he was very good. And then, so he was a colourful character, and people in the garage, all the people at Harold's Cross loved him.
Yeah, that's what Niall said.
Loved him, and he was a terrific character. But you see.
But would people have known there were shadows in the home?
No,
we all
absolutely not. My mother would never speak to them outside.
Right.
Nobody would.
Right.
You kept that behind your own.
Right.
My father, then, you see, was trapped in this marriage too, and I don't know about my mother and father's personal relationship, but I think they didn't sleep together after their late 30s.
Okay.
And that was because my mother was in ill health. Now, that must have had a very bad effect on him.
Well, that's what I was thinking when I read the book again yesterday. And there are those moments where, like, that wedding night, which presumably you could have been conceived. But your father actually cried into his hands on that night.
Yeah, so
and you don't say why.
But I don't know why.
But you do say a neighbour said that, someone said, Anne, whatever her name is.
Was it what?
But some neighbour said to you later that your mother had said that she had a problem with all that intimacy and close contact.
You see, I actually don't know. I'm even afraid to hazard a guess on it.
Okay.
But I do know that my mother, her family did not approve of him.
Yeah.
He was a motor mechanic.
Yeah.
And they didn't approve of him, and she ran away to marry him. Now, did she arrive on his doorstep and say, "Well, I'm here, I ran away to marry you"?
Okay.
And he said, "Oh, God, I didn't intend it to go this far."
Yeah.
Certainly there were no physical relations before marriage. There wouldn't have been at that time. But
people.
For me, and he was basically a very nice man and a decent man, you see. Right. So perhaps he felt the obligation to get married.
Okay.
Perhaps he never did. And perhaps that's the root of the whole trouble.
That he felt he was pushed
he was pushed. I don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, okay.
But it's only in the years later when I can rationalise what may have happened that I'm able to come to some sort of understanding about maybe what did happen between the two of them. But it certainly didn't make for a pleasant or particularly good character building childhood.
For you. Mm. No, well, I mean, the story that was even abused by John Ryan in that article, we heard about the knife, and anybody I've talked to remembers that. No, but it's rubbish.
But it is. But I mean, that was an emotional night, and it was...
Yeah, but you also wanted him dead, which to me is more important than showing up tonight.
Did I really want him dead? I don't know.
Did you not say... Well, if your son said to you, "I prefer if you were dead,"
yeah,
you're sensitive.
Sure, I believe him. But I'd also have to say, look, he said it in an emotional moment.
But he was crying. He was crying when you went back down.
Oh, God, he was.
You know what I mean?
He was very upset.
Yeah.
So he was, yeah.
Does that not make you think of him and have him more as you get older? Do you not get closer to what he might have been feeling?
Absolutely.
You know?
Did he feel, oh God, I've lost Michael?
I've lost Michael.
Did he feel, anyway, he's an arty little bastard? I honestly don't know, because I was an arty little bastard.
Yeah.
So I was quite unpleasant,
All right, okay.
So there was a real bad side there, and that's where there is that kind of aggressive thing that I would turn.
All right.
During that quote, when I suggested to Mike that he used journalistic tactics similar to mine as an interviewer, I meant in terms of moving an interview nearer the area of psychological exploration, which was an area that fascinated us both. But next up, during this interview in 2000, I suggested to Murphy that maybe similar explorations of his own psyche had become more of a factor following the breakup of his first marriage to Eileen Murphy. Mike has since married former art show producer Anne Walsh, because then he, for the first time, submitted or subjected himself to psychoanalysis.
But it can never be resolved then, because you say you kind of did go, I think when your marriage was breaking up, you did go for the first time and only time to analysis. To try and deal with the build-up resentment. And did that help? Did you finally say, I've got a kind of intellectual
it helped me to be able to rationalise my relationship with my family, my lack of relationship with my family, because I know he was very proud of me. He used to tell all the people at Harold's Cross how proud of me he was.
But he didn't tell you?
Never, no.
See, that's the thing, isn't it? Isn't that
yeah.
All right. But the same was with your mother too. You also had a kind of strange dynamic of feelings, a strange range of feelings.
But you see, she was, I was very close to her, and, I think she was very good to me in terms of encouraging me to be different and to do the things I want to do, and to travel, and she encouraged me to not to be ordinary. She sort of had.
She also gave you an interesting book or something. I saw that in one of the articles when you were 13.
She gave me a series, Delight, which is a series of essays by J.B. Priestley,
which is a pretty good start.
Which was quite an interesting one, and I liked them, I liked them, and we didn't have in the name of God, I'm getting these for you, but I liked the essays, and then I used to read avidly at the time as a kid. But she was very far ahead of her time because she had a modern way of thinking, but yet because I was the eldest, she did like to treat me as a surrogate husband. And I was the one that she would talk to, and she would talk about, and of course, I was being turned against him. Now, I don't know that she was doing that by intention.
Okay.
But I was being turned against him.
So part of you hated her for that?
Later, later when then I was going to get married, and I got married very young, and of course, I met Eileen, and I fell in love with her, and I wanted to marry her, but I hadn't even a job at the time. But one of the things, the motivating factors, I suppose, not that I'm suggesting for a moment that was the motivating factor, but an additional factor was definitely that I wanted to leave home, to get out of the house. That's
very Tom Murphy-ish, isn't it? Tom Murphy has written about that many times.
Yeah, but I did. I wanted to get out of the house.
But also, you see, what I found the irony to be that your mother, wasn't it, your father was deemed not to be worthy of your mother.
Well, no, that was only her family who said that. You see, her family, I think, felt that he was socially inferior.
Yeah.
But he wasn't.
Okay.
But
they didn't turn up at the wedding or anything. Neither family turned up.
No, they didn't turn up.
So there was no wonder you had to taste snobbery.
So and then my mother's brother, poor Uncle Jack, was a bank manager, and of course this was a big deal.
Yeah.
And when my father would go to Uncle Jack's house to any of the parties, my father would sit in the kitchen drinking stout.
Okay.
But he wouldn't come in with the rest of the family.
Okay.
And I don't believe he was feeling anything other than my place is really in the kitchen. I think that's how he felt.
Yeah.
Now I would love now to have a conversation and say, okay, let's sort this out. Can you just tell me what in the name of God happened all those weeks ago that you were unable to deal with?
Yeah. So you would recommend to any children, be they daughters or sons, if they have similar questions of their parents, to go and talk to them now about it?
Yeah.
What is the opportunity?
Because there might be a story that they don't talk about.
Yeah.
There might.
But you, but also your mother then didn't approve of Eileen.
Well, she didn't.
So this whole network.
Yeah, the whole thing. But she didn't approve of Eileen, I think, because she could see that I might leave. She didn't want that.
Did she call you a runner or something? Said he was a runner.
So was Eileen's mother used to call me the runner.
All right.
The runner.
But I mean, well, your marriage didn't actually have a good start because your daddy also said you were a worthless bastard.
He did, yeah. He told her that.
Break someone's heart.
He told her that. And of course, I was very angry when he said that.
All right. She only told you going home that night.
He was right. But I was still very angry. Yeah,
I can say it.
It's all right for me to say it.
All right, but those kind of schisms were always there. Those kind of tensions within your home.
Yeah,
were really strong.
They were very difficult, and it affected all of the children, but all of them in different ways.
All right.
All through the family. Declan got out when he was only 17, so he missed a good lot. In any case, I protected him. He was number 2. But my sisters, Patricia and Catherine, got it, and so did John, who was the youngest.
Right.
So they weren't easy days, but on the other hand, I think they might have been made easier. Had they been in the last 20 years.
Because you say people
could talk about them. And a young person like me could actually challenge or could get on to someone and say, hey, listen, will you talk to them about it? But I just feel sorry now. My poor father and my mother must have felt we lost Michael somewhere along the way. And he wasn't as kindly disposed in later years as maybe an older son should have been.
But you weren't. You had let them down at that level.
I think they maybe felt that. I think they maybe felt that. But I honestly don't really know.
But do you feel a failure as a son?
No, I don't feel a failure as a son. Do I feel a failure as a son?
As their son.
I don't actually know, because there wasn't what was expected of me. I mean, I was always kind of generous in ways. and I suppose I brought some credit on the family.
All right.
So from that point of view, I don't think an awful lot more would have been expected of me.
All right.
I don't think so.
But you still have that line, and it was said to you when I saw you in the Late Show the last time round, about the kind of continuing idea, if there's a hereafter, I don't want to meet them.
Well,
which a lot of people, I remember my mother watching that and just going, good Jesus. Yeah. You know what I mean? It is a very strong...
It's a hard thing to say, and really... You see, I remember when I did all that, Joe, when I did the Late Show and about the book, it was after the trauma of my marriage.
Right.
And what happens
in that...
Yeah, and what happens in that time is... I mean, it's again, you're able to look back on it and reflect on it.
Even a couple of years later.
Yeah, a couple of years after you're able to do it. And so my marriage had broken down, and it's bad enough a marriage breaking down, and such a huge change, a catastrophic change in your life. But it's bad enough it happening in the first instance for all involved. But for it to be in the newspapers on a very regular basis makes it all the more difficult for everybody. So the wounds are opened. You're kind of suppurating for a period of time afterwards. And I was. And during that period of time, I wrote the book. And I think because I felt so open, so exposed, so damaged myself, I possibly lost an element of my normal judgment. Okay. And I think my normal judgment and discretion went a bit out the window. And that's why I don't feel now as angry at my parents for what happened.
All right.
And I probably was unjustified. Damn it, they were only trying to get through their own lives as best they could, and they didn't know how to handle it either. Yeah. So and writing about it in the book, I now wish I hadn't.
All right.
Because
just that particular thought.
That whole thing about their marriage and that.
Right. You wish you hadn't talked about it at all?
No, I'm glad I thought about it because it actually
talked about it in the book.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, one of the worst experiences ever for me was that this is about walking into a shop and seeing an Evening Herald headline, I tried to kill my father. And I just thought, oh God, the poor man did not deserve that. Okay. And I mean, I threw a knife at him in a fit of temper, but I didn't try to murder him in his bed or anything, but I was angry about something and I threw a knife at him, but it does read worse than it actually was.
Sure.
And it sure hurt him.
Yeah.
It sure hurt. It hurt him a lot more than it hurt me.
Yeah.
Because he was very upset about it. Although again, he would never speak to me about it. We never spoke about it.
Okay. All right.
So I do feel at that time, so the book was probably ill-judged in its timing. If I were doing it again, I would take a more benign view, I believe, than I did at the time.
But you would not like to hear Mark, only your daughter, say, I don't want to meet my father in the hereafter.
I would absolutely not. And that's why I actually have changed now to the extent that I would actually very much like to meet my father.
Would you?
In the hereafter.
I'd like to get to talk to them and say, it's time for that conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's like at times of grief, like at these huge catastrophic times in people's lives of death, marriage breakup, these great events, they do leave an element of damage.
Was it also that you were actually going through analysis at the time you were writing the book? So you were being told to look at the wounds.
Yeah, so
you were told not self-evasion no longer.
Yeah, that's true.
So you had no choice at that level. It was like, and you were writing it as you were talking to that doctor in Dunleary. So, but when you say the paper's making it public, you're talking specifically about the way the Sunday Indo hammered away at it every Sunday and kind of ran with the story.
One of the things that I always maintained was that I don't whinge about the newspapers, right. and I really don't. I don't whinge about it, and I learned that many years ago that I take it on the chin.
Okay.
Now, but it hurts nonetheless. But I do go by the old edict of don't let the bastards know you're hurt.
Okay.
Except
Colin Tobin and Tom Widger. That's another part of your book.
Don't have much time. But that's right.
And who called you Marshmallow or something? You never got that was
Tom
O.D.
O.D. Yeah, that's right. That hurt too. You see, what I don't like. There is a tough, hard side to my personality.
Okay. All right.
And if someone like Tom O'D at that time saying I was a marshmallow, he was wrong.
Okay.
I knew what
does it mean? Self-centered?
Self-centered. There's no depth. No depth. Self-centered. And the same with, I suppose, Eamon Dunphy. calling me. I think the flower pot presumably meant more or less the same thing.
What did he call you?
Flower pot.
Oh, the flower pot.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
And presumably that's what it meant. But they're mistaken. And I think the way I handled my own career, when I wanted to leave something, I left it.
Right.
When I wanted to move, I always got things done as I wanted to do them.
You still do, don't you?
I still do.
The moment it's time to go, you go.
Absolutely. And didn't I get my timing right on this?
Okay.
I get my timing right.
Yeah,
I mean, the timing has been right.
Yeah,
it has
but that's been something that drove you. You see, but you also explained that as a rationale behind the end of your marriage. You said you were a man who was constantly hungry in need of stimulation and needing something more. I mean, that's part of your nature too.
It is, yeah.
Isn't it? You know, whatever happened, I don't know. You know, I mean, I don't want to go too much into that.
I don't want to talk about that, but yeah.
But you know, that element of, and the fact, I mean, that you were continually growing while doing the art show was firing hungers that maybe led you in other directions. Apart from love, apart from another woman, it's like you always moving on.
I think so.
You know what I mean?
I do think so, and I think
which to me is moving against this image of you as this. And I've heard people in the Irish Times say to me they hate you on the art show.
Okay, here I must stress something about the next section. When I at one point, not completing my sentence, say that Mike is a numbskull, I meant that's how he was seen by some of my peers in the arts section of the Irish Times. It obviously was not, or is not, my perception of the man. Also, after Mike suggested that Paddy Woodworth, one of its editors, was a snob, I had to say off tape that this was not my experience of the man, who had given me my weekly music slot because, he said, he liked my socio-political tilt on things, and whose own politics were decidedly left-wing.
And I've fought your case because you're a lame brain, you're a numbskull. You know this kind of, he's just a fucking lightweight, that thing.
But what I'm doing is I'm actually functioning for listeners outside.
I know.
I'm not showing off. I actually do know a deal more, perhaps, than I let on to know.
You definitely do, because I've seen you do that in the art show where
Absolutely.
we say something off mic, and if I use something like postmodern, you let me use it.
That's
but when
right.
I'm on mic, you say, what's this nonsense, Joe?
So
you're moving into
but I'm very conscious of the fact that, and what I did, what I believe that what I did with brilliant teams on the art show.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that has got to be emphasised too. The art show was a success, huge success, I believe, through the years, through its own brief, but also through the teams I've had working with me. I've had some fantastic teams, just really great people working with me. But very much part of it, from my own point of view, was this is relatively new to people, this thing about the arts. There was a feeling of timidity in some areas about it, and there were also the kind of people you're talking about in the Irish Times. You see, I believe that I actually believe that the Irish Times has assumed much of the ethos of the art show.
Do you?
I believe it has.
Okay.
Well, I do.
All right.
But I believe, certainly within the Irish Times itself, there were many sceptics about my doing the art show in the first instance. And
in RTE.
I had some of the Irish Times people some of the people who were involved on the editorial side in the arts show. And I remember one or two of them being incredibly patronising with me.
Reviewers from the Irish Times?
Well, the person I'm thinking of in one instance is Paddy Woodworth.
Oh, Paddy, yeah, okay.
Paddy Woodworth.
Right, yeah. Because he was the arts editor at the time.
He was the arts editor at the time. So, I mean, an arts editor of the Irish Times coming into me. And I made some joke about stamping grapes. So I said it was stamping the tomatoes to death or something like that. And he turned around, in conversation with somebody, he turned around and said, "No, Mike, that's wine."
On air?
Not on air.
Oh, okay, yeah. I bet you would have had something to say to that.
I said, well, did you actually think I meant that I thought that peasants trampled tomatoes? I said, I knew that was wine.
All right.
And, just thought you might have known.
Oh, okay.
And I thought, you arrogant little fucker.
All right, okay.
And so, consequently, I found that with a number of these people, and there were some of these people, and there were a lot of them in the Irish Times, as it happens, and academics as
well.
Like
arts workers,
reviewers,
book reviewers, film reviewers, all that stuff. Okay.
With some of them that I realised that I actually had a greater breadth of knowledge than most of them.
All right.
Yes, they might have said I specialise in literature. Yeah. Yes, they might have specialised in theatre. But across the board, I actually had a greater breadth of knowledge. And as the years went by on the arts show, I did garner more knowledge, more information than most of my critics.
This next section I didn't use in print simply because it would have read as too sickly self-aggrandizing on my behalf, a line I know I'm walking dangerously close to during this show. Even so, I told Mike that I thought he was, here we go again, a clever bastard, in the sense that when it came to his weak spots, he brought onto the art show the likes of Ethna Tinney to cover classical music and myself to cover pop. But I will use the quote here because Mike's comment makes it clear that choosing me had, in part, a personal meaning for the man.
But you didn't use me, but you learned from it too.
You'd be a good example of it, Joe, because you were able to articulate the popular culture, and you were able to define it. You were able to place it, popular culture, through music in the main. And the relevance of that, to me, goes back to my childhood, where I was in listening to Elvis Presley and Mel Torme and whoever else. And this is popular, that's culture, but placing it in a context is very important.
But that's what you were doing.
But similarly, with Ethna Tinney coming in and going through the composers' lives and all that, again, I knew a lot of people don't know anything about Brahms. So when Ethna Tinney is talking about Brahms and what he did with his life and all that, to me it was riveting. I was learning, and so were a lot of other people.
But it's not the way it all has changed over the years, and I've watched it because I've been with you since 1990. The shift has changed. When Elvis Presley died, the Irish Times considered it not worthy of a front. The only paper in the world. He was just a rock star. Now the Irish Times is dominated by promotional articles pushing gigs that they make money from. So that's where everything has shifted in the time you've done the art show.
That's right.
So from the high art paradigm to popular culture rules okay.
That's right.
Which is what you were arguing for when you started in your first interview in the Irish Times.
Yeah, that's
about the art show.
Yeah. I mean, the truth of the matter is that the emphasis, if you took the emphasis on the arts from the time I started the art show, and you had in the Irish Times, and I'm not picking on the Irish Times because I think it's the best paper in the country.
Okay.
But there were people in the Irish Times and there were people in the arts, and they effectively felt they owned the arts in general, that they had a special insight into the arts, and that they would disseminate the information on the arts as they saw fit to the great unwashed who really didn't need to know. What they really needed to know was what I, the critic, the mediator, think about the arts. That's what they need to know, not about the arts themselves.
Right.
I said, no, I want to know about the arts themselves. And I don't particularly want people to think that I'm the clever dick who's going to tell them my interpretation of the arts. I'd like to get people who actually can communicate enthusiastically about the arts to talk about what the arts are.
Right.
As distinct from hearing somebody. That's why when academics come in to the arts show, there are some extremely good academics who come into the arts show. You know, Declan Kyberd and Brendan Kennelly and others. But many of them, we drop them immediately. Why? Because they are broadcasting to the faculty.
Okay.
Many of the people who write the introductions to catalogues in IMA, in some of the galleries around, are writing profiles of the artist that the artist himself doesn't recognise, using words that have to be dug out of a dictionary somewhere, and sentences that I and many people like me simply don't understand, but in my case, I'm willing to say I don't understand what that sentence means.
Right.
But they're only interested in it's a publication on my CV, and the other academics, curators, directors will read it and be impressed.
All right.
That was the stuff that I was trying to do, to at least put a dent in.
You felt that very specifically about the visual arts, though, didn't you?
I did. I thought
and was it particular arts critics in the Tribune, the Times, or wherever that you went? That's exactly what you're doing that I want to undo.
Yeah, it wasn't even a mission on my part, really. It wasn't a mission. But I did see that there are a lot of people like myself who are enthusiasts about the arts in general, who are not purporting to be experts, and who would like